I'm going to call us to order at 6:03. And we have Chris here taking our minutes. We're going to do public comment first, and I already see that Herb has his hand up, so there's no one in the building with us present as visitors, so Herb, you're muted.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm not sure why there's a reverb, but that's okay. So in item number 5 or V, F on your agenda, you have an action item to determine the method for voting on articles typically voted from the floor at the annual meeting. And the recommendation is to vote all articles by Australian ballot, which I assume by the next G would be on town meeting day. I think this would be very unfortunate. I totally understand that it's probably a pain in the neck to have that annual meeting be subject to, you know, a lot of questions, answers, people coming in. I think so it's probably not as efficient, but I think it's the wrong time to do it. You know, just the context, this is the only real meeting, you know, since we consolidated all our five towns. This is really the only meeting where people from the community can come in and talk directly to folks in the administration, folks on the school board, and actually get a response. You know, I understand the board meetings and the process, and it doesn't allow for dialogue. But, you know, other than to a certain extent, the community engagement committee, people don't have a chance to talk to you folks. So I think that would be unfortunate to, you know, change that particular, at least at this time, you know, until there's a substitute. I know we've been talking, the board has been talking about community councils. Unless there's some substitute for community members to actually come in and have a dialogue with folks, I think this is the wrong move to make, at least at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawn.
I have a question.
So can
I think
we're
if
going to get to that.
Herb, if you're able to stay throughout the meeting, I think you'll hear us talking about this as a board, so I hope you'll stay tuned.
I have a question.
All right, Brenda?
Okay, in general, I agree with Herb, but if you do go to decide to do Australian ballot, I've got 3 questions that I would like answered. First, if you are planning Australian ballot, are you thinking of it just for this year or for permanently? The second thing is, when we went from voting the budget from the floor to voting by Australian ballot, we voted 1 year to use Australian ballot the next year. And so if we are going to be electing officers and voting on public questions by Australian ballot, is it necessary that we that the public vote on whether or not to use Australian ballot next year? Can we just do it this year? And question 3, if you do vote to elect officers by Australian ballot, must they first be nominated by petition? Thank you.
Thank you. If you'll stay tuned through the rest of the later part of the meeting, I'm sure you'll hear the board discussing your questions. Okay. Not seeing any other hands up. Okay. So we are in need of an executive session under Title I BSA 5 313A 7 academic records or suspension of or discipline of students. So we'll invite Patrick to join us. Is there someone willing to make that motion?
So moved, Krista.
Okay.
I'll second.
Sarah? All right. All those in favor of going into executive session under Title I BSA 5 313A 7 academic records or suspension or discipline of a student. If you're online, please give me a thumbs up if you are in favor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. In favor in the room?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so you were sent a separate Zoom link for that meeting? We're gonna.
Is it easier for us to leave and you
No.
guys stay?
No, we'll just walk next door. Are we back?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
We're live, Johnny.
All right, so moving on, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Yes.
Krista, and is that Sarah?
Sarah.
All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, if you're online, give me thumbs so I can see. Please say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Okay, next is an executive limitations monitoring, the update on the FY23 budget.
All right, so I will present the budget. It will look very familiar. Share my screen. All right, so similar format to what we've seen. So this slide hasn't changed. This is looking at enrollment for each of the schools over the past few years. And projecting out a few, or sorry, just out to FY23.
There.
And again, I think what we
Yes.
can notice here is that there's a decline in most of our schools, and certainly a decline overall as a district, which again is certainly not news. This is something we've been talking about for years. When we look at with those enrollments and we look at class sizes across schools, for 21-22.
Take questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to take questions along the way, sure.
That head count?
Sorry, Dave, I missed that question.
Is that head count, when you're talking numbers of students, is that head count?
So this first slide, this enrollment slide, this is head count, yes. And when we're looking at these classes, these are the average class sizes, also looking at head count. This is not equalized people. And so again, as we've talked about, there's a slight reduction anticipated for next year in Lincoln to bring class sizes a little closer into range here. And you can see the change from one year to the next across the schools as we project into next school year. Again, none of this has changed since the first time you saw this slide 3 or so presentations ago. Don, if you can just help look for hands up.
Okay.
That would help me.
All right.
And just a reminder of the class size guidelines. This shows that we're in range with where these class size guidelines want us to be. Also worth noting, in the FAQs, someone asked something more specifically around, rather than looking at averages, how many students per grade at each school and how many students in each class at each school, looking at elementary schools. So in the FAQs, there's a spreadsheet that shows that information if you wanted to drill down a little bit more. Just sort of summarizing that enrollment over the past few years and projecting out to next, you can see that, as I said, almost all of our schools have lost students. Bristol is relatively flat over that period of time. Some ups and downs along the way, but comparing FY23 to FY18, it's relatively flat. The other end of that spectrum is Lincoln, which has lost 41% of its students in that 5 or 6 year window. So again, not news for us. This is what is part of what's creating challenges for us that we're trying to figure out a way through.
Can I just check? Dave, is your hand up because you have another question, or is that from before? Okay, thank you.
So now looking at equalized pupils, we can see, again, with that same sort of historical look back just a few years and projecting out to next year, we can see what's happening with our equalized pupils. The blue represents what we're sort of credited for in terms of equalized pupils at the state level. But as we know, the year we're in, FY22, we had a hold harmless that we benefited from. So there's an asterisk there that reflects our hold harmless count, not our actual count. And then likewise in FY23 in the blue, we're benefiting from a hold harmless as well. So that's noted. And just, it seemed important to acknowledge where we would be in terms of an equalized pupil count if not for the hold harmless. And that's what that 1407 represents. These numbers are slightly different from what you saw last time. I think they're off by maybe 3 equalized pupils from what you saw before, and that's just an update that we got from the state for those figures. Story is essentially the same. And again, putting that to numbers, right, to the finances, with an equalized pupil for FY23 projected at 19,826. If FY23 had the same number of equalized pupils, if we hadn't lost equalized pupils since FY18, we'd be able to spend $1.8 million more and keep our cost per equalized pupil the same. That's with the hold harmless. If we took the hold harmless away, that represents now $2.5 million in spending that we could spend. So pretty significant impact when we start multiplying out almost $20,000 by each equalized pupil. So just highlighting again some of the assumptions behind the figures that you see tonight. It does assume, as it has since the beginning, that we not fill positions that we chose not to fill coming into this year. This year, as we did with almost every year for the recent history, we have taken advantage of some attrition that has happened and chose not to fill positions. This has us continuing to not fill. As we talked about before, given that steep reduction in student enrollment at Lincoln, we're looking to reduce 1 classroom. And again, to bring, since Lincoln's enrollment is going to be in line with Beeman's enrollment, it seemed important that the administrator time was comparable. So that is why there's a 0.1 reduction in admin at Lincoln as well. I think the last time you saw this slide, it had us still assuming a 10% increase in healthcare premiums. We've got really good news that we can expect a 6% increase in premiums. That is, I think, the lowest that it's been since I've been superintendent here. So that's really good news. A little bit different number for equalized pupil than what you saw before, a reduction of 22.95 because of that hold harmless, which again, without the hold harmless, we'd be seeing a reduction of 58 equalized pupils. So the hold harmless has a very significant impact on us this year to the benefit. When that goes away, we're going to have to wrestle with it, but as it stands now, it's helping us with FY23. Still projecting a $1.4 million fund balance, which we'll talk more about. Again, this assumes there's no spending threshold we have to worry about. We still are using the more conservative of 2 yield projections, so when we start talking about tax rates, they could be more favorable than what we're projecting. And we're not making any assumptions about the weighting study. That's very much up in the air, and the potential impact on us can be significantly to the good or significantly to the bad. We don't know yet. And there's a lot of unknowns about Act 173 as well. That was going to have much less of a significant impact on us, but this assumes no impact, again, because of the unknowns there. And I see a couple of hands. Dave?
Thank you. Looking at the bullet on the number of equalized pupils, when the presumption is that it's going to go away in FY24, right? Is that the year after what we're talking about? And what's the implication of that? And would that be a appropriate use of the educational reserve fund?
Yeah, so the implication is a significant loss of ability to spend without impacting the tax rate. And that is a potential use for ed reserve and or fund balance.
I've got one small point. It's important to note that the hold harmless kind of gives us a cushion, because that really bad ADM from last year, it will be off the average. So we'll be averaging only our declining students. So truly, next year, our equalized pupil will be better than it would be this year without the hold harmless. But I'm way deep in the weeds here on it, and I apologize, but you're going to see a little bit of it softens the fall for us, but it doesn't eliminate it.
And I think another way I'm thinking about what you're saying, Floyd, is when we have a benefit like the hold harmless in 1 year, it helps us for 2, because when they're calculating equalized pupils, they're calculating it based on a 2-year average. So this difference of 35 or so equalized pupils that we didn't have to lose helps us next year, as well as helping us the year after that, because we get to have that 2-year average benefit.
I thought it was a 3-year rolling average.
No, I'm pretty sure it's a 2-year average in calculation of equalized pupil.
He's thinking of the 6th semester.
Maybe thinking of career centers. Career and technical is a 6 semester average.
Kevin had his hand up, but it's down. Kevin, did you get your question answered, or do you still have a question?
No, same question as Dave's.
And I think that one of the next slides shows that in a little bit of a graphic as well, as we project out beyond next year. Somewhere. Yeah, it's coming up. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, some of the questions that came up, nothing really has changed here. The question was, would a 5% budget target be sufficient to provide the social and emotional support? If not, what is? Here are some of the things that we identified that came through from feedback from principals and staff. And subsequently, I've asked for $540,000 more to be able to address some of these needs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. Another question was around providing that social and emotional support, right? So as I said, $540,000 is the added ask over what we were originally projecting to just roll forward. And as we were looking at it before, projecting staff out, rolling everything forward, we were going to be able to come under that 5% target. And then these additional needs were identified. And with the favorable yield and other factors, we were in a position where I felt I could ask for $540,000 more than what would be rolled over, which facilitates getting 6 more professional staff to help with mental health, safety, and other intensive needs. And that's separate from ESSER funds, and it can also help us stretch the Ed Reserve Fund dollars, which we've talked about using as a bridge from post-ESSER reality and more efficient MAUSD reality, which is still a strategy that we're encouraging, and we'll talk more about that as well.
I think Dave's hand
Is
is
that-
still from.
Is that an
before.
old hand, Dave, or a new hand? Okay, thank you.
So it could be a new hand because is the 540 going to be taken out of what could be reserve funds, or is this an increase in the budget of 540 grand?
This is an increase in the budget of 540,000. And I think what's important as we're talking about this, right? We have between ESSER, some other funds that we have through various grants and whatnot, and this added dollar amount, we have many positions that we're looking to add to help find additional supports for students. This all presumes we can fill all of the positions that we're looking to add, which is not at all a safe presumption. So I do want to just be really upfront about that, that's an unknown for us in this really difficult sort of hiring reality. Not unique to us by any means. Everyone's struggling with this, but there are challenges to adding lots of positions that we want to be able to fill and may not be able to. In fact, I think one of the FAQs the other night was around what's the plan if we can't fill positions, and I think I said the plan is to develop a plan, because until we know what positions we can't fill, I can't know what the plan would be to help meet needs without those positions. So, and this is also, it'll be particularly challenging for us as we look to add lots of positions, but it's not new to us to have vacancies that we can't fill, that we have to adjust staff to work around to still meet student needs. So we're...
Know at this point whether what exactly in mental health, safety, and intensive need positions you hope to hire?
Well, I can't say that we know exactly. We have ideas of the positions we're looking to hire right now, and whether or not they're the ones that materialize is unknown, in part because if we can't fill one position but we think we'd have better luck filling something else, we may need to pivot. But we are thinking about additional school counselor time. We are looking at a position that really focuses on ensuring, in particular, students on 504s and students that qualify for McKinney-Vento, which is the sort of a homeless act, are receiving services and attention that we're struggling to provide right now. In terms of safety, this is looking at someone that is going to be overseeing sort of our crisis response, thinking about it from that safety lens, but also digging in more on Title IX, which is relatively, it's not new legislation. Title IX's been around for a long time, but there are recent changes to Title IX that place a pretty extraordinary burden, in particular on small Vermont schools. Title IX is around sexual harassment investigations. And it was written, there's sort of a general consensus, it was written with colleges and universities in mind in doing that kind of investigation in terms of the staffing involved. A Title IX investigation involves 4 or 5 different staff members that have to be part of the investigation, and the various levels of kind of the chain of command and who investigates and who's the initial determinator and who is the grievance person to go to. So that has created a pretty significant burden that this safety position that we're looking at would be able to take on, and can help with more of our typical hazing, harassment, and bullying investigations, which are really time consuming. So those are some of the positions that we're looking at, as well as some interventionists for those positions.
And then Steve has his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Patrick, you were noting that the healthcare increase looked like it was going to be more favorable, so like a 4% difference. Is that accommodated somewhere?
It's reflected in the overall budget figures when we get to that slide.
Okay.
So in terms of the fund balance, again, we're still projecting the same fund balance. And we had talked about a few different options last time we met to discuss this when we were at Beaman. And the option that seemed most favorable to the board at that point was putting the $870,000 into the capital reserve fund and placing the balance of $549 into the ed reserve. And where that brings us is adding that 549 to the ed reserve brings that balance up to just over $1 million, almost $1.1 million. And again, as we were talking about, we have this gap that I'm anticipating that will be after ESSER and before we've fully implemented whatever long-range sort of sustainability decision we end up making. And having this money, and potentially more if we can add to it in the future, are dollars that we can tap into to help bridge that gap without having to reduce lots of positions before we land to this more efficient place. So that feels like a really important strategic move on our part to have those resources to navigate whatever that transition might look like. And then in terms of the $870,000 in the capital reserve, Floyd has a pretty detailed kind of cash flow projection that we're leaning on to be able to fund some of the projects we've been talking about, in particular the lobby and bathroom renovation here at Mount Abe that's coming up, the electrical upgrade at Mount Abe, and the roof at Mount Abe. Those are the three really big projects on the horizon that we know we need to address. And this 870 positions us well to address those and potentially some other unexpected things that might show up, which are known to happen from time to time. All right, any questions on the ed reserve or the capital reserve funds? Or what to do in general with the fund balance?
I do have the questions Rob submitted to me in writing that just if we can read through those, I guess, but I can do it at the end if that's easier for you to.
Yeah, if you have them as we're flowing, that's fine. If you want to wait till the end, that's fine too. Whatever.
Yeah, the first one's on revenue. Yeah, the other one's on fund balance. So I think it's more, more fund balance and revenue streams. So I think if we get to that.
Save it to the end?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is sort of a historical view, a similar slide to what you've seen multiple times before over multiple years. So again, as we're projecting out, this kind of comes back to your question, Steve, this $32,665,311, which is the total expenses, that reflects the 6% increase in premiums as opposed to the 10% that we were using prior to this. And so that is an increase of $912,000, which is a 2.87% increase in overall spending year over year from 22 to 23. Then we subtract out the revenue that we're projecting and gives us our education spending. And that education spending is what we divide by the equalized pupil count that we are told we are going to be credited for. And it gives us a spending per equalized pupil of $19,826.37. So that's $1,182.53 more than the current year, which reflects a 6.34% increase. So this number has bounced around a little bit as the equalized pupil number has dialed in a little bit, and we've tightened up the total expenses projections, et cetera. And again, that original target was 5%. With the added $540,000 to help meet needs, that bumps us up to 6.34. And so what will be on the ballot, as you saw the sample ballot tonight, is that 6.34 increase, as well as the cost per equalized pupil and the total expenses. So this is where we start to look at, this was one of the questions, what does next year's budget look like in the context of really the following year, but even more than that, sort of years beyond the following. And so the FY23 budget that you have before you tonight has us, if we had a spending threshold, which we do not, and if that spending threshold for 23 was 6.32% higher than what it would have been in 22, which we feel pretty confident about, we would be under the spending threshold by about $217,000 for FY23. Assuming a 3% increase in that spending threshold into FY24, and assuming all the staff positions that we have funded through the budget, this wouldn't count the staff positions funded through ESSER, but all those additional 6 positions that we're adding and the others that are already in the budget, assuming all of that rolls forward and lots of other assumptions about rate of increase, et cetera, we would project in FY24 that would have us over the spending threshold by about $800,000. And that swing of 200,000 under to 800,000 over, or about $1 million difference, is projected to roll, again, if we assume everything rolls forward as it did from 23 to 24 in this example, then we could expect a $1 million to $1.1 million growth over the spending threshold each year. So if FY24 would be 800K over the spending threshold, FY25 would be about 1.8 or 1.9 million over the threshold. And then FY26 would be about 2.8 or 2.9 or closer to $3 million over the spending threshold. Again, assuming we roll forward all positions in programming, etc. So that you can see, and it shows it graphically here, that our spending over the threshold grows each year. And again, this doesn't assume anything for the weighting study. It doesn't assume anything for 173. Those variables are not accounted for or attempted to be accounted for in any of these projections going forward.
Dave has his hand up.
Dave?
Thank you, Patrick. So as I look at your blue bars, and if we were to draw an average line through there, that the averages change quite significantly from the line that you might draw as an average from 18 to 22 compared to 22 through 26. Is that primarily because of loss of pupils?
No, that's directly, and Floyd can jump in if I'm thinking about it differently. That's a direct relationship to not filling positions. So the 5 or 6 or 8 positions that we don't fill each year keeps our spending lower than what it otherwise would be. And you can see when we don't assume any staffing reductions, our rate of increase is much greater than the rate of increase in the spending threshold. Floyd, is that how you would summarize that?
You know, it's
I did hear what Wood said.
basically reiterating exactly that. If we keep everything we have based on the current model, that's the increase you see. Why you see a less steep incline previously is we've taken advantage of any cost savings we can each year to keep that gap wide.
Floyd, feel free to pull up a chair closer if you want, if it'll save your voice.
So that despite, I mean, we lost student population from 18 to 22, didn't we? And I guess what you're saying is that we dealt with keeping the budget lower by reducing staff, sort of in tune with the loss of pupils. But what you're saying from 23 onward is that the number of pupils, despite the loss of pupils, keeping the same number of staff. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. So this graphic shows overall spending relative to the threshold. And that's a target we've used in the past, is really looking carefully at what the threshold is. In the absence of the threshold, we've been looking at the cost per equalized pupil and what's the increase in the cost per equalized pupil year over year. And that's kind of become a different target, really importantly, because that shows up on the ballot and people react to these figures. So I wanted to show that change over time from the cost per equalized pupil perspective as opposed to overall spending. And what you can see here, so again, this is using $0 of the fund balance and having those additional $540,000 for additional positions. You can see about and this has shifted a little bit since the last time you saw this. It's about a 6.5, give or take, % increase per equalized pupil each year going forward, carrying those same staffing and other expenses rolling forward as you saw on the previous slide. If we didn't have the $540,000 in spending, the FY23 budget that you see would be about 4.34%, and then from that point forward, it would be about a 6.5, give or take, % increase in the cost per equalized pupil. Dave?
That's from before. Thanks for the.
All right, and there were some questions around how does ESSER fit into this, and the capital reserve and the education reserve to fill these positions. So again, just really important, each of these different kinds of funds are one-time funds, which are great, and we have to be really careful about how we use them so we don't position ourselves for some unfortunate decisions in the future. So the ESSER funds are here to help pay for COVID-related expenses, which can include personnel and capital expenses. In particular, HVAC, sanitizing, those sorts of things for capital expenses, outdoor structures, excuse me. Essentially, when we're talking about use of ESSER funds, we have to be able to say that if not for COVID, these expenses wouldn't be as needed. So we have to make that connection between ESSER funds and how they help address COVID. Capital Reserve Fund can only be used for capital improvements. It cannot be used for staffing. The Education Reserve Fund can be used for almost anything except for capital projects. So the combination of Capital Reserve Funds and Education Reserve Fund really positions the board well to be able to achieve whatever it needs to achieve as we move forward through these still pretty uncertain times.
Dave has his hand back.
Okay. Important to note that the Education Reserve, the board has authority to decide how to spend. The Capital Reserve requires a vote of the electorate to spend money. Thank you.
It's unopened.
Dave? Oh, sorry, your hand's down.
I can't seem to control my hand.
Okay, and there was a question about will we need to RIF or take advantage of attrition to hit the target, and if so, what are the consequences? Can the system support it? And the reality is we don't need to reduce through RIFs or through attrition to hit the target. However, as we've talked about, given the sharp decline in Lincoln, to have equitable staffing and class sizes, etc., we are looking to make some reductions there. In particular, the 1.0 classroom teacher position, I have great confidence that there will be some shift somewhere in the district that we will be able to not have to reduce someone, and that would result in a reassignment as opposed to a reduction in force. And in terms of use of attrition, I've talked about our practice in recent past to use attrition as our friend as we navigate these tricky times and try to meet the financial pressures going forward. That's a strategy we would want to continue to use going forward as we have been, and even more so when we have clarity of direction in terms of where we're going for our future that is more sustainable. To take advantage of attrition to move us toward that more sustainable place is a similar but extended strategy as we make that transition. It's a great way to make the kind of changes that we're going to have to make. I don't know that we can get where we're going to end up entirely through attrition. That would be the hope. But when we have clarity on our future direction, we can then think of attrition as a strategy to get there. In the absence of clarity of future direction, obviously it's hard to apply that strategy in that more strategic way. Dave?
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, it's the easy thing to do to use attrition to restructure the staff and reduce staff members. However, I think one of the most important things that we've learned, maybe it was always there, but has been brought to the forefront during COVID, is the culture of our schools is of primary importance. And if the kids aren't involved in a culture or a positive culture, then they're not going to learn. And so if there are staff positions that need to change in order to get a better school, then maybe we have to do more than just depending on attrition to adjust staffing in our schools.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think that summarizes some decisions that were made a few years back to try and make some big shifts in the face of some financial challenges that we had to meet. And it might be necessary going forward. And those of us that were here and involved in that change a few years ago and are still involved in that change from a few years ago recognize how very hard that is, and to your point, how impactful that is on the culture and climate in our schools. So it's a pretty delicate walk. Yeah, and it's there's no easy way through it. Yeah.
I agree.
So what does this all mean for tax rates and how it hits people in the pocket? So you can see the tax rates here. And again, we don't have the Act 46 adjustment this year, so the adjusted homestead tax rate is the same as the homestead tax rate.
Is this our first year without that?
This is our first year without that.
Okay.
And so in reality, the effect is we feel it as though it's an increase of 2 cents, right? So when we don't get to reduce by 2 cents as we have the last 4 years, we feel that a little bit. Thankfully, it comes to us in a year when there are a lot of other things that are very favorable in terms of taxes. Most notably the yield. We have a favorable yield and a very favorable yield that we had to work with. So that's great news. It's not always the case. One thing that was not so favorable was the CLA. I think we all know the real estate market has been unusual for the last couple of years. And we're starting to see that reflected in reductions in the CLA. And when you have a reduction in your CLA, it has the effect of increasing your tax rate. And remember, the CLA is different for each town. Each town assesses their properties at different rates, different years. And the market in each town can be a little bit different. So that's why you see the variability in the CLA that's here. And as you can see, the property tax rate after CLA is somewhat different across towns, and it is directly related to CLA. Everything prior to CLA is exactly the same, and then the CLA is applied and it changes the tax rates. So as a board, what you can control is the adjusted homestead tax rate, which I think is a reasonable tax rate as it sits here before you. You can't control the CLA, and that's the reality, and it's unfortunate because it does have an impact. How this translates into dollars, which is really what I think resonates more with folks. Again, using the favorable yield, not the very favorable option. The change per 100,000 of assessed value for the approximately 1/3 of Vermonters that pay based on their home's value ranged from a decrease of about $24 in New Haven to an increase of about $105 in Starksboro. And again, that $105 per 100,000 in Starksboro, in a normal year, I think that's not necessarily a big jump. Floyd may have a better gauge on that. I think that's maybe in the realm of what we might see pretty typically. But when compared to where the other towns are, it's quite different, and that jumps out. It is 100% the result of a steeper decline in the CLA in Starksboro than what the other towns saw. I can't tell you why the CLA in Starksboro dropped much more than others, but I can tell you that it did. Floyd, do you have a better sense of that?
Well, my conversation with the town clerk was that they recognize that a number of properties have sold for substantially more than what they were on the books for, and they had a number of properties sell. That it's just reflected greater than any of the other towns who also have the same issue, but just didn't get the same hit of the number of sales at the increase over the tax rate for those, or the tax assessed rate for Starksboro.
And when we first projected CLAs for you early on, we were projecting a 5% decrease in CLA in each town. And for the most part, that was right in the ballpark of where they landed, with the exception of Starksboro, which dropped, do you remember? 12-ish?
10.2, I think.
Was it 12.2? Yeah. So more than twice as steep a decline in Starksboro than other towns. So again, this is for the 1/3 of Vermonters, presumably 1/3 of Addison County residents, presumably 1/3 of our 5 towns that pay based on their home's value. And for the other 2/3, we're looking at a decrease of about $132. Again, this is using the most recent median Addison County income for a home. This would range for folks that are below this median or above this median, but $132 or a 6.9% decrease. Dave?
So I think it's also helpful to note that this is based on the income of families. So household income, which is a pretty broad description of income. And it also has a year lag because income tax is calculated on last year's income, and property values are calculated on this year's property value in April. So so there's a what's referred to as a lag or a look back. But if incomes have gone up, then the decrease is not going to be as significant as we see in this chart. In fact, it might even be an increase for some household if their income has gone from 65,000 to 75,000, for example. Their projected tax liability may be actually increased over the previous year. However, if you had a layoff or due to COVID and other circumstances, you had a family that went from 75,000 last year to 65,000 this year, their decrease is going to be, a lot more than what's in this chart, because this is a percentage of income that this is based on.
And so the next several slides kind of walk through the themes from the thought exchange and how they're reflected in the budget. Nothing here has changed since the presentation the other night. Should I go through these again, or?
I don't think so. I think if they have that changed, we have the presentation to look over. So.
Right. I suppose if somebody having seen this and you have a copy of the presentation, if somebody has a specific question about any of these next several slides, I can answer that. Otherwise, I won't walk through each of them again.
So Rob's questions center around that FY '23 budget that was included. We typically take a cursory look at that.
The detailed budget?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Look. So this one, is it 6 pages, that 6-page?
Yep.
So if you want to pull up the document FY '23 budget that was sent out this afternoon, the summary detail. Just to take a look at that. I have Rob's questions here, so just for the purpose of everybody. One question was, what are all the different revenue streams for the FY '23 budget? And he referenced the 4,060,615 figure. So if you look at that, I think it's on the first page. He's just, is it the first page? Yeah. Is there specific things that are revenue, part of the revenue?
Yep, so so what's listed here under the estimated revenue shows all of the various revenue sources. I think what's important to note here is the education spending revenue is money that comes from the ed fund, and we put money into the ed fund through the taxes raised. Everything other than the 28,268,000 are various other sources that are listed here that we can speak to if there's a specific question about any one of them.
Well, I think when he asked these questions, we didn't have this information. So
Okay.
having this, that might answer that question. And
Okay.
if not, he can get back to, let me find his other.
I'm happy to walk through any weeds type question with any of the board members. And we've taken a pretty conservative view and status quo view on the revenue side, given that Act 173 is, they're talking about pushing it off for a year, and we're not confident to either reflect more revenue, which we think will happen, and I'd rather generate additional revenue than have us come up short.
So that was another question was why is it 300,000 different than the previous year?
Because we're not using any of our fund balance to offset taxes.
Okay.
And in fact,
in
if
the
you look at
past,
that-
we've used a large portion of that to offset taxes, and our goal as a team, the board and admin, is to get away from using that fund balance to offset taxes, because then you have no flexibility in the following years.
So Patrick, I think what you're about to explain may be useful to like the new people in understanding. So if you're looking at that revenue page, and I'll let Patrick explain that.
Yeah, so on the bottom of the first page there, under estimated revenue, the next to last line, I guess, says prior year fund balance. And you can see we use $366,229 as a fund balance to offset taxes. So that shows up as a revenue. And in FY '23, what you see here reflects us using $0 of a fund balance to offset taxes. So when we use $366,000 the year before to offset taxes and don't use that money the next year, it shows as a decrease in revenue. And that's what you're seeing here. And that largely explains that $300,000 difference.
So again, what are the major contributors to the $1.4 million fund balance? Are they from positions not filled, capital projects not completed, etc.? So
I would say it's primarily a combination, Floyd can elaborate, primarily a combination of not filling some positions, taking advantage of attrition, as we were talking about before, as well as some expenses that ESSER ended up paying for that we otherwise might have paid for.
I think that's.
Those are the big drivers.
Well, yeah, our huge driver is staff, and not taking advantage of attrition when appropriate adds up pretty fast at $90,000, because you don't just get the revenue or the what you're paying out in salary in savings. We get the Social Security, the unemployment, the medical insurance, the other insurances, the retirement. So it can be a really large driver fairly quickly.
I also think it's important, I always like to put it in this context too. So when you think about the complexities of education finance in Vermont, then you layer on the factor that we are building this budget with all its complexities, making lots of assumptions about something that a year that's going to start in 6 or 7 months from now. If we're 99% right, we still have a $300,000 fund balance. So if we're 95% right, we start getting into $1.5 million of a fund balance. So when you account for just the variability given how budgets are built and the assumptions we have to make and how early they need to be adopted, and then layer on top of that COVID expenses and not filling some positions, that's what produces the fund balance we have, which frankly, the fund balance we have, relatively speaking, is fairly low compared to what a number of other districts have for a fund balance. Even Addison Northwest has I think a considerably larger fund balance than we do as a smaller district. So,
And that's this year, though. That's sort of unique. That the size of them is unique to this year because of the COVID money.
yes.
I mean, we always have a pretty healthy balance, right?
Yep.
But this one seems like it's at least $250,000 higher, right? If not more.
Yeah, I would
than
say
what
even
we
more than
usually-
what we would normally see. And again, there's some variability when one less or one more staff member being filled or not is $100,000. That can
Right.
swing things a fair bit. But I think the fact that we're seeing many school districts with much higher fund balances than normal is related to not being able to fill positions, even if you're not intentionally not filling positions. The effect is the same when you are unintentionally not filling positions. And layer on top of that, COVID monies coming in that are covering expenses, et cetera. I think that's why we're seeing across the board higher fund balances in school districts.
And it looks like Dave has his hand up.
Yep, Dave?
Thank you. Lord, pensions. So recently, there's been a report to the legislature from a pension committee that seems to have been embraced by most everybody. And I just wonder how that is affecting our budget. I think it's like has no effect this year, but maybe in a year or two, it starts having an effect. Have you looked at that at all, Floyd?
Only a little bit, yeah. And I think what's important to note is the decisions that are recently, I don't know if they're made or about to be made, won't impact this budget. But I think it's important to note that in recent years past, school districts, when they hire new employees, are being charged a fee to try and help close that gap a little bit that didn't exist before. And now they're talking about different contributions being made to help close that gap even further. And if Floyd can elaborate.
I think the what's hitting publicly is the change to the professional staff in their contribution side that's being negotiated on the state side, that really that piece isn't going to impact our budget. It's just going to reduce the net income for that group under that bargaining unit.
And as I understand that, the more veteran folks that are kind of grandfathered in at a 5% annual contribution for their retirement, and then some of the newer folks are paying in at 6% of their salary toward the state teacher's retirement. And the conversation now, again, I don't think it's a decision
But they
yet,
talked about 8.
is to move it to somewhere between, yeah, could be 8, could be even as high as 9%. And I think the percentage would be dependent upon what your salary is. So lower salary, smaller percentage, but still 6 or 7. Higher salary, higher percentage, approaching 9%, which is a big shift. If you were paying 5 and you're going to be paying 9, phased in over time, that would be a big shift. And sadly, at the very least, it doesn't help staffing issues in education when changes like that are made to the retirement fund.
I get that, but I think from an actuarial point of view, it's probably wise. I don't know, 9% seems kind of high. I hope they trim that down some. But it probably will affect contract negotiations going forward. But if we want a healthy pension fund, I think, frankly, more of the salary has to be put into that pension fund.
Did Rob have other questions, Don?
No.
No, okay.
All right. So we're going to keep moving along. So if you still have budget questions, they may come up in this next item, which is under board management and governance. An action item to adopt the FY23 budget with the amount of $32,665,311.35.
So moved.
Krista?
I'll second. Sarah.
Sarah? Any discussion? Now you can go back to that budget document that we were just referencing, and you can see as you scroll through for new people that there are little footnotes on the side to explain when there's a change and what it's related to. I wonder if you might speak to Kelly Services, because that is something that frequently comes up, and so I wonder.
Sure. So Kelly Services is a company we used to contract with to find substitutes, and we no longer contract with Kelly Services for substitutes. We brought that all in-house. I think I think we're happy we did that. I think that's pretty consistent throughout schools, and as expected, it hasn't solved our substitute crisis. But it does position us to be a little bit more flexible and nimble than we were finding we could be with Kelly Services. So it's better, but we're no different than any other school district that is desperate for substitutes to cover absences. And we're at a point in time where our substitute coverage is lower than it has been historically, and the number of staff we have out with COVID and everything is higher than it has been historically. So it's a combination that is very, very challenging in schools throughout the organization. Custodial, classroom, support staff, cafeteria, across the board has an impact.
Anyone else have questions? Any Zoom questions? Dave?
So my comment is that I support this budget. I think it's a good budget. It's unfortunate the tax rate in Starksboro. I think we'll have some work to do to explain to Starksboro residents why they're seeing such an increase in their taxes. I'm pleased that we're not using fund balance, because going forward, we're going to need it. And I'm glad we're being careful about using one-time funds. I hope we put enough in the capital reserve to deal with the big capital projects we've got going forward. But overall, I think it's a good budget and I support it.
Anyone else? All right. All those in favor of adopting the FY23 budget in the amount of 32 million, wait a minute, let me double check. That's budgeted expenses, right?
Yep.
32,665,311.35. Please say aye.
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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Okay. Moving on next to approve the warning, and there was a corrected warning sent this afternoon. So if you, looking at the one in the packet, close that one and open the corrected one and take a look at that.
I move to approve the warning.
All right, that's Krista.
Second, Sarah.
Sarah.
And then I can offer an overview if that's helpful.
All right, so, okay, Patrick's gonna sort of walk us through that.
So I'm going to bring you back all the way to last year's annual meeting, where we did basically the same thing that we're talking about doing tonight with a series of action items in here. Very recently, legislation was passed which allows the board to take articles that previously would have been voted from the floor at the annual meeting and put them all on Australian ballot for town meeting day voting. The challenge is the annual meeting can either be all in person or all remote. It cannot be hybrid. So in order to vote from the floor, you would have to choose the all in person option, which has its complications. And if that doesn't seem desirable, the alternative is all remote, which means those actions that you would normally take from the floor have to happen by Australian ballot. It doesn't mean the annual meeting doesn't happen. It doesn't mean there isn't discussion on the items that are going to be voted on by Australian ballot. So the back and forth that folks expressed an interest in having can still happen. It's just that the vote doesn't happen from the floor if it's going to be all remote. It becomes an informational session ahead of the sort of continuation of the annual meeting on town meeting day when the voting actually takes place.
Patrick, I think you said this at the beginning, but this is what we did last year.
That's what we did last year.
Pam Marsh moderated our online,
Yes,
and we discussed the articles, but we didn't vote.
correct.
Yeah.
Didn't vote until the Australian ballot on town meeting day.
So where in the past, somebody would stand up and say, I nominate Pam to be our moderator, we don't have that, but you do have the option of writing somebody in on the ballot.
Yep. And there was a question about if somebody was running for, say, moderator, would they then, if it's going to happen by Australian ballot, would they then have to get a petition and go through that process? And the answer is yes and no. Yes, they have to go through the process to be on the ballot, but that process, based on legislation that again was just passed, does not require signatures for a petition. You have to fill out the candidate consent form, and that's it. You don't. And so this is true for board members that want to run. This is true if you run for moderator or for clerk or for treasurer or for whatever position that we would be voting on. Candidate consent form, but you do not need signatures on a petition.
Patrick? So on the warning, it talks about for the purpose of voting by Australian ballot. But then on our agenda, action F, are we putting the cart before, do we have to first say we're going to vote by Australian ballot before we approve this warning?
Yes, that's a good point. So this warning assumes that the decision is to vote by Australian ballot as opposed to voting from the floor. So we could change that order, which might make some sense.
And this is just a one, we're not making this change permanently.
Correct. And I don't know that we'd have to get a legal opinion to see if you even had authority to make that decision right now. Some of these decisions are made under legislation that was passed just for this next year.
Yeah.
Although I do think I'd have to look at the legislation again. It might allow this through a point in time next year that would allow it again. But essentially it's a limited time that the board can make these decisions. I think there could be a process that the board could undergo to make this more of a permanent decision going forward. I don't know what that is, we could look into it, but this right now as it stands is a temporary decision.
So should I withdraw the
Well,
motion? and
I'm
we-
just wondering if I could just, if we could keep it this way, if I had an idea how people felt about F. Just as a temperature taking, are board members in favor when we get to F to adopting it? Because then we could just keep moving through the line and not have to rearrange things. If you rather not do that and you want to do the F first, then we'll backtrack and do it. But I'm good. Are you in, when we get to F, are you in favor? Is that Steve, you do have your hand up, or is that in favor?
That's in favor.
Looks like we're good to just move ahead.
Yeah, all right. Then we'll just move ahead, and when we get to F, we'll go ahead that way. Who's,
That was Dave.
was it Dave? I didn't hear you.
He said, what are we in favor of?
Well, I'm just taking a temperature check that when we get to F, are board members in favor of determining to vote by Australian ballot? That was my question. I didn't want to get to F and then find out we already approved the warning and board members weren't going to be in favor of Australian ballot after we did the warning. Dave?
I just have to say, would be so much better if it were in person. We're a small community of 5 towns of people who care an awful lot about education. And the meetings that we've had where the public has attended have been really good. And I would very much like it to be in person. However, I'm an old guy and I'm at risk here, and we have like over 1,000 cases a day, and makes me pretty nervous about in-person stuff. So I'm going to let the rest of the board decide what to do. I'm sort of on the fence on this one.
All right, then rather than rearrange, we'll just keep going through. So back to our motion, which is to approve the warning. Is there any more discussion, any questions about the warning?
Can I ask a quick question? The only thing I get confused about is when you elect a moderator, when she moderated the meeting, did we elect her prior to the Zoom meeting, or she just hangs on, she gets elected for the following year? Is that, just to clarify?
I don't believe she begins her term until July 1st, so the current term runs until then, and then the new person would be elected from July 1st of 2022 on.
And there's some handy language that says, or until another person takes over.
Right.
And the clerk and the treasurer, are those, do we have an idea of who those people want, like, are gonna be for that position? Or we literally just write, we're gonna elect a clerk, but we don't actually say who it is? Or do we elect the clerk?
No, it was typically voted from the floor, so somebody would nominate, and our clerk was Jennifer from the central office, and our treasurer was Barb Torian from New Haven. So.
And they are both, I think, interested in continuing and are going through the process to fill those out. I think Jennifer has posted something on Facebook and elsewhere, trying to get word out that these positions are up for election and that people should fill out their forms and go through the process if they're interested in running.
I don't believe Pam's interested in another year.
That I have heard indirectly that Pam is not going to be seeking re-election as moderator. So that is a position we will be looking for people to for someone to fill. So if you know somebody, spread the word.
So I'm just clarifying, it's completely a write-in, or there are going to be names underneath Article 1, 2, and 3?
As this stands, it will be a write-in.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So all those in favor of approving the warning, the corrected warning that we were just looking at, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7.
I guess
Any
what-
opposed?
I think you can finish, and I'll clarify.
Any abstentions? All right, so it passes.
A point of clarification as I'm thinking about your question you just asked, Sarah. So the deadline hasn't come yet for people to submit their forms. So I think if we have people that submit their forms and are running, under each of these articles on the ballot, it would show a person's name if they've done what they need to do to get their name on the ballot. So it wouldn't necessarily all be a write-in. There will be some names here in all likelihood.
So this, the warning needs to be signed by everyone. So it will be at the central office, and we have until Tuesday?
I can also bring it on Tuesday.
Right.
If that works. If anybody's not here tonight and won't be there Tuesday, we would just ask they stop at the central office on Wednesday.
To sign it, and we need you there to sign it.
Or really anytime after today, they could stop and sign once it's been adopted, yeah.
Okay?
Can I just do it?
Yes. Yep, find your name. All right. Our next action item is to approve the ballot, and that was sent corrected as well. So I need a motion to approve the ballot.
So moved.
Krista?
Sarah, is fine.
All right, any discussion? You're all looking at the corrected one that was sent this afternoon. All right, not seeing any hands or questions. All right. All those in favor of approving the ballot, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes. Okay. The next is to approve and authorize the chair to sign the financial management questionnaire, and that was included with the agenda, so there is that, if you want to take a look. Is there a motion? Sarah?
So moved.
Oh, Krista?
I'll second it.
Sarah? Any questions?
Just, it is very tiny to read.
It is very tiny. And Steve?
Not that we have to get into this tonight, but I still always have an issue with this questionnaire that in a past version, I was looking this up online today, and in a past versions, they would have yes, no categories. And if you answered any of them no, then you were doing something wrong. Now, if you look at the questions, the answers could be ambiguous. Like maybe the answer is no, and that's the correct answer. And I sort of feel like the auditor's office and the AOE ought to put together a little cheat sheet for boards, so they know when these questions they're answering these questions, whether they're getting the right answer or not. And if they're not, then, you know, where do they look to find the right answer? And I did find documents out there that would give you the right answer, but none of us want to wade through those. I think that's part of poor Floyd's life, but anyway, that's my comment.
Floyd, maybe you and I can talk about a self-created cheat sheet if we can't get the AOE and others to come up with it, or maybe the auditor can help us with something.
Yeah, I think we can come up with something.
Yeah, we'll give that some thought, Steve, and see what we can do to help.
All right, any other questions? Liz?
Yeah, I just noticed that under whether or not the board had done financial training, and that was a no. And I think that one thing that I was able to find on the VSBA website was a financial training. It was about an hour-long video, and I found that helpful. So maybe that would be a way, even just watching that, all of us watching that would be a way that we could hopefully maybe check yes on the board participating in training for next year.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Okay. Hang on, I'm just writing that down. All right. All those in favor of approving or authorize the chair to sign the financial management questionnaire, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes. Okay. The next is to determine the date for the annual meeting. We originally had on the schedule a meeting for the 16th of February as our board meeting night, but that does not comply with the requirement that the annual meeting be 10 days before town meeting. So we would like to move it to the 22nd. I know that's during vacation week, but that allows us to be 10 days before a town meeting. So is there a motion to set the date for the annual meeting for the 22nd of February of this year?
So moved.
Krista?
Second, Steve.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor of setting the date for the annual meeting for February 22nd of 22, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, any opposed? Any abstentions? That one passes. The next action item is to determine a method for voting on articles typically voted from the floor at annual meeting.
So moved. Krista.
Krista.
I'll second that, Sarah.
Any discussion? So what we're talking about is moving this to Australian ballot, so everyone's clear. All right, all those in favor of determining the method of voting on articles by Australian ballot, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
2, 3, 4, 6. Right, that's 6. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that's 6, which I think that requires me to vote, so I would vote in favor of this to make it a quorum of the board. So 7 in favor and 1 abstention. Good. Next action item is to determine the date for the Australian ballot voting, and the recommended date is town meeting day.
So moved. Krista.
Krista?
Second, Sarah.
Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of determining the date for Australian
We're going to Australia?
ballot voting for town meeting day, 3/1 of 22, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
That's where the budget training is.
Fantastic.
Financial training, that's where we're going.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone's done the research on how it ever got its name to be Australian ballot.
Oh, yeah.
All right, the next item is an action item to commingle the results for all articles on Australian ballot.
So moved.
Krista?
Sarah, second.
Sarah? Any discussion?
And I'll offer a little context there. There has been legislation passed that allows some municipalities to instead of commingling, to have towns call in their results, unless the municipality, in our case, has articles of agreement that state that the voting results have to be commingled. So we've had some town clerks that were interested in, rather than sending someone to a location with the ballots to have them commingled and counted in a tabulator, they wanted to just call in the results from their town. And we can't comply with that because our articles of agreement require commingling. So in case there's a buzz in some of the towns that we're not allowing the results to be phoned in by town, that's why.
Everybody understand that? Yep. All right. Everyone in favor of commingling the results for the articles on the Australian ballot, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes. All right. Next item. Again, this is another one we did last year too, to authorize the use of a voting tabulator.
So moved.
Krista, moves that.
Second, Sarah.
You? Any discussion? All right. All those in favor of authorizing the use of a voting tabulator, please give a thumbs up or
Aye.
Or say aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Nope. Passes. Sorry, I got to cover all my bases. All right, the next action item is one we talked about last year. Again, to decide whether or not to mail ballots to all registered voters. The recommendation is to mail ballots to those who request it. And this is consistent with the 5 town clerks practice.
So moved.
Krista?
Second, Sarah.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
I think we should send them to everybody.
Erin?
Yeah, sorry. I was just wondering if we know if there's a certain percentage of people who request them, like out of the registered voters, what percentage of people request them versus, so that we know we're really only getting like a 50% request or a 20% request of ballots versus sending them to everybody and possibly getting a higher rate of return.
The way it typically works, I don't know what the percentages are, and it might be different in each town. But the way this typically works is that we prepare the ballot and we distribute those ballots to the town clerks. And if the voters in a particular town are requesting a ballot, the town clerk mails their voting ballots as well as our ballot with that. So we tend to work in that kind of a relationship with the town clerks, as opposed to in one of the in the 5 towns, the town clerks only mail as requested, but we mail them to everyone. That has some complications, and that's not how we've worked in the past. What we did last year was the same thing. I think we followed suit with the town clerks and worked with them to distribute in the ways that they were distributing their regular ballots.
Steve, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think if we mail them out to everybody and the town clerks are just doing it on request, that could make a lot of head scratches for people thinking they might be getting something by mistake.
Any other comments or questions? All right. All right, all those in favor of mailing ballots to those who request it, please signify by a thumbs up or aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3. Sorry. 4. Okay, any opposed? 2 opposed. So that, okay, so 4 in favor and 2 opposed, which will require that vote. So I'm voting in favor. So that would make 5-2. Okay, what's that? So just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, wait, did I miss somebody?
There's 8 total.
Yep. So can you, if you were in favor, can you put your thumbs up? I think I missed somebody. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're 5, and I would be, okay, so I would be 6, and it would be, and then there were two who were not in favor, correct? Yeah, okay, so 6 in favor and 2. And so the motion passes. All right. We're down to a public comment. That was a power surge. All right, is there any public comment? I do see a few people that are still on. All right, can you run us through the meeting evaluation?
What is the level of engagement of all board members, high or low?
Good enough for a Friday night?
Good enough for Friday night.
Yes. I only have a high or low option. What do you want me to put?
Aye.
High? Okay.
High, because for those who actually came here.
Was the agenda followed, yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments? Okay. Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board, yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments? Is the chair effective in fostering a professional culture regarding fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process, yes or no? Yes. Any comments? Other feedback for the chair?
Yeah, I wondered if we should think about always just scheduling a second or next budget meeting. Or holding a space so we don't get to like last minute scheduling and then, you know, fitting in like we should just assume we're gonna need that time, that extra meeting. And maybe we won't need, like, better to have it on the schedule. Yeah, am I being clear?
On a Friday night when we're super efficient.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that could be a way to do it, but.
So schedule a second budget meeting.
I remember when the
before.
conversation started, we were like, oh, sometimes we have another meeting, sometimes we don't. And then the calendar just gets away from us, but, you know, just to know, we're gonna need that extra time. Somehow we don't, great, then we have a free night. All right. Okay.
What went well?
Steve?
Never mind.
Okay.
What went well with the meeting?
Record time.
Good
Efficient.
Efficient.
What suggestions do you have for ways to improve future meetings?
All right.
Can I ask one quick question?
Sure.
Is it, when is the things due for people that are running? To be
The
on the school
consent,
board?
I believe it's next.
Monday.
Yeah, next week.
It's on Monday?
But you don't need signatures, so you just bring it to your town clerk. Monday at 4:30 is for Bristol is when
And do we know about which seats are up or that they need people to run for?
So.
Yeah, if somebody had a summary of that, it'd be helpful.
So what I typically do is send the message out to the people whose terms are up. So they got a message last month that said, your term is up. So Andrew's term is up, and Andrew has said he will not be running. So Brad and Aaron were appointed. So they are only appointed until the next election, and they must run for the remainder of the term. So I think one of them, the term actually ends this year, so in order to continue, they have to run for the full next term. Kristen Blanchett is up in Moncton, and I'm not sure her plan. I know she has a petition, but I'm not sure her plan. And if you look on the website, you can see all of our names, and when our terms end, you can regularly check there to see that.
So Don, I'm still unclear. The two board members who were appointed, do they have to run regardless of whether the term for which they were appointed is over or not? That's my understanding. Is that correct?
So one of them got appointed, let's say in the middle, at the end of the first year of a 3-year term. So Brad got appointed maybe in March or April. He can remain until there is a regularly scheduled vote time, and he can remain in that seat appointed until the next vote, which is going to be town meeting. Then if he wants to continue on for the remainder 2 years of that term, he has to run for the remainder of it. If the term ends, which I think is what happened with Erin, that term ended this year, so she has to run for the new term beginning. Does that
So
make sense?
irregardless, both members who were appointed need to run for office.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Sarah, did that answer your question? Okay. All right. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Krista?
Come on, Sarah.
Second, Sarah.
We've been the one too.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning at 7:46, please give a thumbs up or say aye.
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 1,
Aye.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any
Good night,
opposed?
folks.
Any abstentions? All right. We're passed. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Floyd and Patrick.